Major funding for the production of Campaign 83, the Treen Edwards debates, is provided by Exxon Company USA's Baton Rouge refinery, a partner in growth with Louisiana since 1909.
Hello, I'm Darla McKean, President of the Louisiana JC Women. Welcome to the Great Pelican State Debates, project of the Louisiana JC Women and JCs. The JC Women and JCs are a bipartisan leadership training organization dedicated to individual development through community action. By completing our projects, the communities in which we serve benefit in two ways. First, a community need is fulfilled by the project being completed, whether it is in the governmental affairs portfolio, such as tonight's program, or muscular dystrophy, merit scholarship, our Outstanding Young People of Louisiana Awards, or one of the countless local chapter projects. The JC Women and JCs are getting the job done. Second, and more important, is the resource of trained young men and women that is provided to our communities. Today's young people are tomorrow's leaders, and the JC Women and JCs are preparing our members for those leadership roles now. If you are between the ages of 18 and 35 and would like to join us in our work, or if you would like to learn more about the JC Women and JCs, contact your local chapter or telephone 318-992-4169. And now join us for one of the most important events of the 1983 political year, the Great Pelican State Debate, a public service of the Louisiana JCs.
Live from Baton Rouge, the Louisiana JCs and Louisiana Public Broadcasting present Campaign 83, the Treen Edwards debates. Smith Auditorium in Baton Rouge. Moderator for tonight's debate, Beth Courtney, Public Affairs Director for LPB.
Good evening. Welcome to this meeting between the two leading candidates for the office of governor. This program is coming to you live on the 6 stations of Louisiana Public Broadcasting, WYES-TV in New Orleans, and the stations of the Louisiana Radio Network. I'd like to thank the Louisiana JCs for providing this forum that should prove to be both interesting and informative. For those of you in our audience who were with us last week, this is the second meeting on public television between these two gentlemen. On my right is the present governor of the state of Louisiana, David C. Treen. Governor Treen is the first Republican to hold the office of governor in over 100 years, and he hopes to extend that tenure. On my left is the former governor of the state of Louisiana, Edwin W. Edwards. Governor Edwards served 2 terms as governor and is seeking an unprecedented 3rd term. Tonight, there is no panel of reporters providing questions. There are 7 areas of discussion for our 2 candidates, but we are operating under the assumption that the candidates themselves know their own strengths and weaknesses better than any of us. Tonight, we give them the opportunity to question each other, and we hope that we may gain some new insights. The rules of this debate are simple. Each candidate will be allowed to ask 1 question on each of our topics. The question shall not exceed 30 seconds. His opponent will be allowed a 2-minute response, and the candidate asking the question will be given a 1-minute rebuttal. The same procedure will be repeated on each of the issues. These issues include the environment, economy and jobs, leadership and integrity, spending and taxes, criminal justice, education, and a final topic that is totally at the discretion of our candidates. We will conclude with 1-minute statements from each of the gentlemen. This evening I will introduce each of the topics and then keep track of the time allotted. The evening is yours, gentlemen, and I wish you both good luck. Our first category for discussion tonight is Louisiana's environment. If there is an issue for the 80s, this is it. Voters are deeply concerned about environmental issues such as hazardous waste and toxic dumps, our air and drinking water quality, flooding problems, and coastal erosion. Preserving Louisiana's natural resources will take money, expertise, new technology, and commitment. There may be no easy answers, but our first question tonight comes from Governor Treen. Governor Treen.
Thank you. Question is, for 8 long years, while you were governor, you allowed toxic waste hazardous to the health of the people of this state to pile up in Louisiana. In Ascension, Iberville, East Baton Rouge, St. Tammany, Evangeline, Calcasieu, and in other parishes in Louisiana, we are paying the price of your neglect. Do you know what it's going to cost to clean up these sites?
The figure that I hear bandied around is about $200 million. We should be able to get a large portion of that from the Superfund that was allocated for that purpose in Washington, although practically nothing has yet been obtained. We do have some sites here that qualify, I think 14 of them, for Superfund funds, and I would certainly expect that whichever of us is elected, we will pursue that vigorously. We would also need to pursue the original polluters, those that are still in existence, and see about getting them to pay the cost of such cleanups. During the 8 years that I was governor when that happened, it was also happening in the other 49 states of the nation. You were in Congress at the time and certainly never raised your voice to register objection. We were interested in getting industry. We were not as informed then as we now are about the hazards. And for 3 years you were governor and did very little to stop it. It is true that in this election year you have finally cleaned up one of the waste dumps, for which I congratulate you. I would have wished that you would have gotten the money for that from the federal government, however, under the Superfund thing, because I think it would qualify. You also, in the last year of your administration, during the election, finally managed today to buy some acreage in the Atchafalaya Basin, which you've been heralding for 2.5 years, and also finally created the Department on the Environment, which are all election year actions on your part. And I would merely say that both of us, it looks like in studying our records, are relatively latter-day converts to the cause of the environment. But I'm certainly aware of the problem now. I'm committed to working with the proper people to do something about the environment. I would be more careful about industry coming into Louisiana and hope that we can provide the proper balance between the environment and the need to create jobs.
Well, the fact of the matter is, you said you were aware back in 1972 because you said Louisiana could become a cesspool, and indeed you allowed it to become a cesspool. The fact of the matter is that 6 of the sites have been cleaned up in my administration, if you include Take Cove, which is not quite finished because of the toxic permeation into the soil. It's going to cost a minimum of $200 million, Mr. Edwards, maybe $465 million to clean it up. We've got 5 of these, the worst sites on the Superfund list, and we hope that we can get some money to clean those up. But the Superfund is $1.6 billion, so $200 million would be 1/8 of it if that's all it will cost. That, I suggest, wipes out completely any conceivable surplus that existed in this state at the time that you left office on March 10th, 1980. About $215 million wiped out in this one account.
Governor Edwards, your question.
Well, that's true, but you haven't used the surplus to clean up the dumps. They're not cleaned up yet.
Wait,
my
Your
question,
wait just a minute.
my question to you,
Yeah, his
my question to you is, which of the industries that brought jobs and employment to this state and stimulated our economy going back to 1945 would you have not permitted to come? Which jobs would you have eliminated? Which of the industries now operating and operating during the time you were in Congress should have been closed? And if so, as a member of Congress, and many of them were in your own 3rd Congressional District, why did you not see about closing them?
First of all, when I was in Congress, I worked on committee for a bill for cleaning up of hazardous waste. The Senate and the House could never agree. My party was in a minority in both branches at that time. Now, with respect to industry that has come here, I would like to know what industry came here because you licensed Take Cove, or what industry came here as a result of your permitting the hazardous waste sites, some of which existed before you became governor, but to which was added some 2,770,000 tons of hazardous waste. About 3/4 of the hazardous waste that is at these 5 major sites accumulated during your years. And the question that I would have, and the answer would be, well, my answer is that I don't know of any of those industries that would not have come here as a result of permitting them to deposit the waste here. Most of the good industries that we have here have their own on-site management of these wastes. These are sites away from the premises of the industries that have come to Louisiana.
Now they do, but in the decade of the 70s and 60s and 50s, when we were not as aware as we now are of the problem, they did not. And you failed to answer the question. Which of them would you have closed and which jobs would you have eliminated? And look, don't refer to Tate Cove. In 1970, 2 years before I was governor, and while you were very active in Louisiana circles, Tate Cove was started, and your own people have given you that in a memorandum dated March 26th of 1981, stating that Tate Cove was a site where 4,000 barrels were deposited in 1970. So don't try to make me the illegitimate father of that one. I have enough problems with the environment with accuracy. You don't need to add to it.
All right, gentlemen, I think we've exhausted that topic, or we at least have each had a chance to respond in rebuttal and question. Let's move on to another issue. I think when pollsters ask voters what issue they are most concerned with this election year, the most frequent answer given is the economy, specifically jobs. Even though recent figures indicate that the national economy is improving slightly, Louisiana is historically the last, or one of the last states to recover from a national recession. Already close to 250,000 people in our state are without work. Our unemployment picture is complicated by a petrochemical industry that is declining and the lack of a diversified economic base. Gentlemen, your questions. And Governor Edwards, you have the first question.
When you took office under a specific platform promising to create more jobs, we were below the national average in unemployment. We are now 25% higher, from about 9.2 national to 12.5, 6, or 7 in our state. 240,000 people are out of work. That happened while the state had money left to you by me. What makes you think that you can resolve the problem now created by you?
First of all, in your statement, you have another one of your lies. The unemployment figure in Louisiana in your last year in office was higher than the national average, and it was in 6 out of the 8 years that you were governor. Now, the fact of the matter is that in 8 years when you were governor, you failed to take any steps to diversify the economy of our state. As a matter of fact, you were very cavalier about it. In a Wall Street Journal interview, you said, when you were asked about manufacturing jobs, and the writer said that you said that attracting manufacturing jobs won't solve anything, and then I quote, "You can't make anything out of nothing. It's either there or it's not." And quoting you further, Louisiana's economic future is interwoven with natural gas, oil, sulfur, salt, and fishing. That's where we are. I don't look at manufacturing as indispensable. So during those 8 years, you did nothing to really diversify the economy. Now, what has David Treen done since he's been in office? Several things. We passed the venture capital law in the last session. We passed the enterprise zone legislation in 1981 before we were getting into a national recession. Very forward-looking. We've approved 21 applications for firms to get tax exemptions, creating on an annual basis more than $40 million of new payroll, and creating about 4,000 new jobs and saving another 700 jobs. Also, the Industry Assistance Act, reform of workmen's compensation, which the people that are in the business and know say was a hindrance to economic development in our state. All of these things we've done now. I don't think the people of this state are going to buy the contention that the structural unemployment that we have in Louisiana today is a result of things that happened in the last couple of years, except in the oil and gas industry, which is where you said it all was.
Look, during my administration, unemployment in Louisiana went down a net of 1%, while it was going up nationally a net of 0.3%. Not much of a difference, but it is a fact. Second, it's wrong to say what you just said, because I got Garin Industries here, sewing plants, 7 different one of them dotted around the rural sections of our state, General Motors in Shreveport, the Globe manufacturing plant in Monroe. Those certainly are not related to the oil and gas and chemical industries. We had a great job inducement system going, which created more jobs in 4 given years than any other state in the nation. Now, I hope that the unemployed people of this state have been able to make the last payment on their televisions with the unemployment checks so that they can hear you talk about all you have done for them. And I hope that all of them tomorrow will go to the bank and say, "Hey, I don't have a problem. I'm not unemployed. Dave Treen passed the Enterprise Zone Act, and I'll be here with my paycheck day after tomorrow." It doesn't work like that. It is a job, not a concept that people are looking for.
Governor Treen, your question.
On the economy?
Yes.
I read here from your slick, expensive campaign brochure. You say, Louisiana's business climate ranked 9th in the U.S. during the Edwards administration. By 1982, Louisiana's ranking had dropped to 12th place. Upon what data have you made that statement?
From Business Week and other trade publications. And I might add that I wouldn't be printing slick, expensive brochures if you'd have taken my offer made last January not to have this kind of a campaign. We could have both saved a lot of money in this recession-ridden state with 240,000 people out of work. I think we would have made at least one substantial contribution to the economy by doing that. I simply say that, if, as I said on the last two debates, figures are relative. You use them for whatever purposes you wish. My staff, knowing your propensity to nitpick, went over that expensive, slick brochure again today and verified to me once again that the figures in it are accurate. While we're on the subject, you mentioned about the 10,000 miles of road the other day. We did check that, and I appreciate your calling it to our attention because we did make a mistake. It should be 13,300 and some odd miles rather than 10, and I appreciate your calling it to my attention.
Well, now you are compounding the error. You exaggerated the highway construction by 300%, and the records will reflect that. If you're talking about, you say construction of highways in this brochure, and you exaggerated it in your print by 300%. Now you're upping that to 400%. But what you've done in this brochure here is to rely upon the Alexander Grant report. And the reason we know you're relying upon the Alexander Grant report is because it's the same lie you put forth in this newsletter that you sent out to your people, in which you refer the Alexander Grant report and talk about the business climate in Louisiana, according to that report, falling from 9th to 12th place. Here are the Alexander Grant reports for 4 years, and they show that in your last full year as governor of the state, we were in 24th place in terms of business climate, and in the 2 years that I have been governor, 12th and 9th places. The point is that you cite this and rely upon this as proof that business climate has deteriorated under Dave Treen, when in fact, by your own source, business climate has improved since Dave Treen has been governor.
Gentlemen, we are out of time. We're now out of time in this particular area. However, you know, we have an opportunity to come back to it perhaps later in the debate. But let's move now to another area. Our next category for questioning is one that involves the intangibles in any political campaign, leadership and integrity. Two qualities that every candidate must convince voters he or she has in large measure. Gentlemen, this is not the first time you have addressed these issues, but for those voters who are undecided, it may provide some new information. Governor Treen, your question.
Yes, my question is, do you consider lying as part of your job of being governor?
To whom and about what? Of course not. I don't consider lying to be part of my job as governor. You're referring, of course, to a comment I made in jest, and that's one of your problems. You have no sense of humor. At the National Governors Conference, in which I said, in response to a pompous bureaucrat from Washington who was regaling us with all kinds of facts and figures that were meaningless, when we were pinning him in a corner about how bad things were, and we were talking about energy, I think it was, he said something, well, it's not my job to lie to people. And I retorted, well, I guess it's our job, or I guess it's my job. Some fellow from Texas took me seriously and sent me a check for $5 since he said I was the only honest politician he'd ever heard. But of course not. And to suggest that is a rather juvenile approach to a very serious problem. I do have a propensity for jesting and making snide remarks, which sometimes, taken out of context, as you've just very well done, lead people with the wrong impression. But the times that I have been in the public eye, going back to 28 years, are good times for me. And I can recall in 1971 when I published my platform, many people thought that the passage of a new constitution, reorganization of state government, et cetera, lowering of taxes were unrealistic goals. But we did accomplish all of that and reformed government in Louisiana for 8 years and left a healthy surplus for you to dissipate or do whatever it is that you did with it. But like all people, I try to avoid lying or misrepresenting the facts. Like all people, I make mistakes.
Governor Treen, your rebuttal.
Well, I would suggest that that was probably a Freudian jest that you made at that meeting. The exact words that you said was, it's a very big part of mine. And I suggest that really, that really your philosophy is exemplified by that, because very recently, this year, you talked about how you send Ralph Perlman down to lie to the legislature about the state of Louisiana's finances, and to pick a figure and have him go down there to the legislature. In addition to that, during this campaign, several times you have said Dave Treen cut corporate income tax, an out-and-out lie. You said that you had no interest in DCCL, the company that you helped set up. You said for your friend Jules LeBlanc, when you in fact had an option to acquire stock. You said you acquired 150,000 acres in the Atchafalaya Basin and you didn't acquire any, and I could go on and on if I had more time.
Governor Edwards, your question.
Oh, now, Governor, you're in my ballpark now. We did acquire a lawsuit which we won about 126,000 acres in the Atchafalaya Basin, and then 26,000 acres that we purchased. We could have done anything we wanted with it, but we
Governor,
leased.
do you think you could phrase it as part of the question?
Oh, I don't know about
It's your question.
I'm supposed to ask him about
Yeah.
that? Oh, all right. Okay, honest man. Tell us again, 4 years late, and after the fact, that you had no deal with Bubba Henry, Sonny Mouton, Paul Hardy, and Jimmy Fitzmaurice, and that there was no connection between Jerome Glazer's appointment to the Mineral Board on July 7th, 1981, and the $25,000 you took from him just a week later.
There was none in any of those cases.
Next question.
Well, we have now exhausted that. I tell you what, since we're doing so well in this area, why don't we have one quick question from each one of you? Would you like to ask another one in this area? Or would you like to move on? Well, all right, let's move on.
Look, if there's no connection between those two things, you better talk to me. I'll explain to you how to make a connection between them.
Well, I know that you know how,
Oh, I
because
do.
you got 75,000 from Jerome Glazer. Now,
No,
I have never said,
no,
I've
I
never
didn't
said
get
there was.
that.
I never said that there was a connection between that or not. I've never made that accusation of you. Never. But
I
you got
didn't.
75,000,
No,
I
did
think.
not.
From.
That
Oh,
is-
I see.
that is incorrect.
Oh.
Well, now we're at an impasse, and so since you've both broken the rules, I said it was your evening tonight, gentlemen. Certainly it is. Let's move on to another area. How about spending and taxes? It is the constitutional responsibility of the governor to prepare the state budget. Last year, that amounted to $6,219 million. It is an awesome responsibility to determine how that money is spent and to project how that money will be raised. Nothing strikes closer to home for most of us than taxes. Gentlemen, our next area for questions concerns spending and taxes. And Governor Edwards, you have the first question.
Tax on cigarettes now is 11 cents a pack, bottle of beer 3 cents a bottle, 6-pack of beer 18 cents, fifth of alcohol 66 cents. It generates about $116 million total. You're proposing funding a $200 million deficit in your budget and about a $250 million pay raise, or $450 million, from an increase in these, as you say, sin taxes. That would mean you'd have to quadruple or maybe make 5 times as great these taxes. Do you really propose to raise cigarette taxes from 11 cents to 55 cents?
Absolutely not. And
Thank
that's
you.
another one of your distortions, because I have never said that we needed that kind of money. Those are your figures, and you persist in saying that the budget for this year is $200 million out of balance when it is not. I know of no reason why the public should believe you on that score than me, but I have never said that we were going to raise that kind of funds out of those particular taxes. As a matter of fact, I have said repeatedly that I'm not sure that we're going to need new taxes. But when pressed to the point, in trying to be candid about it, I have said that if we do, I think that's the first place that we would go, and not to raise that kind of money, not at all. But I do think that the alcohol and the tax on wine, which hasn't been raised in a long, long time, could stand some increase if we have to do it. But I've never said that we need those kinds of funds that you're talking about. I think the economy is going to come back, and in the fiscal year beginning July 1, 1984, which is very difficult for either one of us to predict, that we will, if we have normal growth, we would have the funds necessary for that raise, which would cost $200 to $230 million. If we have normal growth, we will have that. And under my administration, that's not going to be taken up with other expenses. That will go. And that's not too much growth out of $4 billion of revenue to expect $200 to $230 million in a normal year.
3 things. The 10% increase you promised pay for state employees and teachers and others will equate to about $250 million a year. You have never said anything at all except about alcohol and tobacco taxes. I invite you during the course of this campaign to say where you would get the rest of the money if you don't propose to get it from all of that. You did commit in 1979 that you were against new taxes, but you tried to raise taxes, did raise taxes, and proposed the largest single tax increase ever proposed in the history of our state. Finally, if you just put the state's fiscal affairs back in the same position they were when you became governor, I guarantee you I won't have to raise taxes.
No rebuttal?
No,
I got a question. Okay. This is a partial list of construction projects funded with cash in 1980. Would you tell me which ones you consider unworthy? Repair the Huey P. Long Hospital in Alexandria, equipment for the Southwest Louisiana Hospital in Lafayette, the Conway Hospital in Monroe, outpatient clinic at LSU Medical Center in Shreveport, the Health and Physical Education building at LSU in Eunice, Life Sciences building at Nichols, new library at Southern University, and on and on.
Which ones I consider unworthy?
Yes.
The on and on. How am I going to answer that question? I don't know what on and on means.
Well, strike that part.
All right.
You're right. Strike
Let's
that.
strike the on and on project.
Yeah.
All those projects were started under my administration. I'm certainly not going to now say that they were unworthy. I'm glad you continued and got them done. And I'm also pleased that I left you the money to do it with.
In your speeches around the state and in your TV commercials now, you're saying, where did the surplus go? Where did the cash go? The surplus that we had on June 30 of 1980, most of which was accumulated, as you well know, during the 4 years that I was governor of this state. But the bottom line is, where did it go? It went to projects such as that. You said the money was dissipated. You have insinuated that it was wasted, that it was squandered. And the point that I make is that it went to very important projects, and yes, many of the projects that you started. In fact, I had a capital outlay bill, which was the most enormous in the history of the state of Louisiana, projects that you added, loading up the wagon, and we had to pay for. $23 million of that surplus went to repair off-system bridges. You left us with $378 million worth of deteriorated bridges, $73 million for highway overlay, $22 million for that prison in Washington Parish, new educational TV station in Alexandria, which I hope is watching tonight.
Thank you. All right, gentlemen, we are moving rapidly through these areas. We may end up with some extra time at the end to have some additional questions. Let's move to this next category. It's criminal justice. Our next area of discussion is a difficult one. As Earl Long said once, there ain't no votes in Angola. But every year our prison population increases, and the financial burden for the taxpayers is great. Recent FBI reports show that crime is increasing in Louisiana. How do we keep our citizenry safe? At what expense do we lock up criminals? When do we use alternative sentencing, pardons, paroles? Gentlemen, you must have these answers as governor, but our first question tonight is from Governor Treen.
Well, one of the things that we must not do is we must not return criminals to the streets. And the question, this is a question, I'm sorry. In the 4.5 years since you changed the law to give you the right to appoint and thus control all members of the Pardon Board, you signed 1,219 pardons and commutations. At least 26 were represented by your former law firm, more than 100 by the law firm of your executive counsel, Camille Gravel. Do you really feel that you can justify pardoning people at more than one each working day during the last 4.5 years of your term?
Well, number one, you understand that pardon board came under the new Constitution. You also appointed a pardon board at a cost of about $500,000 a year, and you must not be happy with them because you don't accept their recommendations. You won't even act on it one way or the other. You ought to just fire them and save the money. Second, we had the first crack at it and had to look at 8,000 to 9,000 inmates and cull the most deserving early in my administration because we were the first people to have to deal with the problem. Third, you must know that the pardon board acts in open public meetings. It has to be advertised in the paper. 66%, 2/3 of those that I acted upon didn't even have lawyers at all. It shows that we had some interest in trying to resolve the problem. Most of them, as you know, were nonviolent people who got out after serving a prerequisite amount of their time. Many of them were already out, as some of those in your instance. And all I can say to you is that at least I did my job. It was a loathsome, awesome job, but I did it. And I suggest to you that you'd be better off, instead of attacking me on that, that you try to explain why it is these kind of headlines are in Louisiana papers. Twice in a row since you've been governor, Louisiana crime rate is up while the nation is going down in violent crimes. This paper in the national news is saying that this is the second most dangerous state in America to live in. Man, if your system of criminal justice is working, the district attorneys don't know about it, and neither do the criminals in the street.
Of course, the crime rate could not possibly be up as a result of anybody that I've pardoned, but could very well be as a result of some that you've pardoned. Now, talking about pardon board action, when I became governor, there were 515 pardon recommendations that you had not acted on that were sent back to the Department of Corrections, far higher than any number that have ever accumulated in my office. You said that most of your pardons were for nonviolent criminals. 124 of them were murderers, 62 rapists, 199 armed robbers. Others, drug pushers, and other drug-related criminals might be considered nonviolent, but I think they do a terrible violence to the people of this state. As a matter of fact, you gave a total of 36 double pardons and 1 triple pardon. One of the pardons that you issued was characterized by John Mammalidis, the district attorney of Jefferson Parish, as the person being an animal. He should not be out on the street. I say to you that the pardon is an exceptional process and should be used only in the most exceptional circumstances.
Governor Edwards, your question.
I agree with that, and that's why I didn't act on 500 pardon applications. I was doing my job also. I didn't willy-nilly and without regard to the public interest sign off on those things. I did what I thought was the proper thing to do. And you're not going to be able to lump it on me, the fact that these people, 1,000 of them, are responsible for the crime rate that the papers are now talking about nationally. So the question I ask you is, what is your explanation as to why the crime rate has gone up and we are now the second most dangerous state in the nation to live in?
Well, I don't think that we're the second most dangerous state to live in. The crime rate and the population of Louisiana has gone up more than the population of some other states, and I think it's about consistent. It takes a long time for the things that one does to have its effect on crime. We have passed a number of laws since I have been governor, in case you haven't been watching, that will have its effect, but obviously do not have an immediate effect. Bringing people to trial sooner, speeding up the appellate process. We changed the entire criminal justice appellate system so that appeals could be heard sooner. We made it tougher for criminals to get out on bail. This speeding up of the process, incidentally, could account, and very well does probably, for more prisoners being in those jails today, because we're putting more of them away. The Drug Racketeering Act is something that we just passed very recently to give us the means by which we can seize the ill-gotten gains of the drug pushers in the state of Louisiana. These things take time to act on. Again, I say to you that if a crime rate has any relationship to what a governor or a legislature might do, then you would not expect those rates to be responsive immediately. You would expect those rates to happen over a period of time. So it may very well be, and I'm not saying this is true, but it could very well be as much the result of things that happened and did not happen during those 8 years as it is now. I don't really think you can correlate that crime rate with any of the activities of the governor of this state.
Governor Edwards, your rebuttal.
Well, the news people say that we're the second most dangerous state in the nation, and the crime rate is up in all the violent crimes in Louisiana, and you are the big advocate of your criminal justice system and have talked about how much you've done to make the streets safe, and the fact are they're not safe. And if they're not, it might be part of your general indecision and the ability to get things done. I suggest to you that the district attorneys of this state know better than anyone the difference between my attitude and my effectiveness in helping them to prevent crimes and to prosecute crimes. And I invite you to talk to any district attorney in this state, and I think more times than not they'll tell you without fear of contradiction that I have the better record. That isn't to say that I'm perfect because, man, we're going to have problems with crime as long as drugs and greed exist in human beings. But I don't think that you can be very proud of this kind of headline, and it makes me feel very bad to know that we are now being talked about in the nation as the second most dangerous state in the nation.
Gentlemen, we are moving through these topics fairly rapidly. I'm allowing some sort of flexibility because I don't think rules should be in effect to limit the discussion, but I'm trying to maintain some sort of fair approach between both of you. I would ask you to ask a question when you're supposed to ask a question, or rebuttal when you're supposed to be doing a rebuttal, and I would ask the audience to refrain from any comments. And our next issue is education. The quality of education is linked to many of the issues that we've discussed thus far tonight. This fall in Louisiana, almost half of our college's incoming freshmen must take at least one remedial course. The question of our state's educational quality, then, gentlemen, has alarming significance. What do you do to stop what has been termed a rising tide of mediocrity in the country and perhaps in Louisiana? Governor Edwards, your first question.
What do you consider to be your flagship, your most important venture, the most important program, the greatest contribution that you've made to the education of Louisiana's public school children?
Well, I'd like to mention two, if I may, if it's all right with you. Three? Fine. The professional improvement program I would count as very important, something that was recommended to you by a commission you appointed back in 1975, an idea that you let die. We put it into effect against your opposition in 1980, so you told the LAE. A professional improvement program to give our teachers $2,000 average additional pay, and at the same time get their skills upgraded so that the teachers got their pay and the people of this state got something for it. The youngsters got something for it. Improved classroom ability. In addition to that, the establishment of the School for Math, Science, and the Arts on the campus of Northwestern University in Natchitoches, I think is a significant achievement. That school has just opened. It will challenge 200 or more students this year to a very rigorous discipline in math, science, and the arts, and it will grow to 700. It will be the largest such school in the country when it reaches its full complement. I think that's important in providing the leadership for our state, to give these students from all over the state and in small school districts where they might not have a chance for this kind of special education to provide the leadership that we need for the state of Louisiana. In addition to that, we have increased funding in the state of Louisiana. If you want to know where some of the money went, it went for education. That's what I said that I would do as a top priority, and we increased education by $640 million, or a 40% increase for funding of education in this state. Those are three.
Governor, the PIPS program you passed, in which I oppose, is not the PIPS program that was recommended to me. This is a report that this state paid for at your direction by your people in the Division Administration, which has been in your bosom since April of this year, which you have refused to release to the press because it has some very critical analyses of the PIPS program. Among other things, it says that no participant who attempts to develop a good program should be as frustrated by activities that are not useful as was expressed to us on the questionnaires. Quote, we are not convinced that greater competence automatically results or effectiveness is increased. Quote, PIP will not have much impact on teacher longevity. Quote, we feel that much of the feeling of frustration with PIP relates to its failure to meet assessed needs of educators. This is what your staff paid for, gave to you, in which you have been shielding from the public, the educators, and the legislature since April of this year. And there's a number of letters and documents from teachers, one of whom says in a letter to you, we teachers need help. We do not need to have such an injustice happen to us, not from the original concept of PIPS, but from the monster of which it has grown.
Treen. Governor Treen, your question.
Well, we'll pursue the professional improvement program. For 3 years, you've been calling the program a boondoggle, an expensive boondoggle, silly theatrics. In November of '82 in Lafayette, talking to the LAE, you said you would abolish the program. Then, strangely, on April 16, 1983, in New Orleans, you told the Louisiana Press Association that you had changed your mind. And then, about 4 months later, at the Alliance for Good Government, apparently you changed your mind again and calling it now a boondoggle in education. Why do you keep talking out of both sides of your mouth on the professional improvement program?
So a person with nothing between his ears, such as you, can understand what I'm saying. Now let me try to tell you again. The PIPS program you passed is a bastardization of the PIPS program that was recommended to me in the legislature. I disassociate myself from it. I do not support it. I never have. You said it would cost $40 million. I said you were way off the mark, and as a matter of fact, your own people now tell you it's going to cost $93 million this year, although you have only put $70 million in the budget to fund it. Shows your own desire not to fully fund your own program. Second, I did say that a teacher who's in the program and who has a contract has a right to maintain the contract, and I would not cancel it. I couldn't have the legal or equitable authority to do that and would not propose to do it. I did say that I thought we could modify the program, make it more meaningful, let all teachers, including beginning teachers and all educators, a third of whom are not able to participate in your program, have a piece of the action and provide for a more meaningful program at no more cost than the $93 million that yours has now escalated to. I was right when I said it was a boondoggle, and that $40 million would come far short of the mark of funding the program. What you have done is to provide something here but a vehicle for teachers to get more money, which they justly deserve, but putting them through meaningless exercises, which this program, which you have concealed from the public, clearly shows. And since you haven't done it, I'm going to have this available with my press secretary tomorrow for the press or any member of the public to look at this program that you've sat on, this evaluation that you sat on this 6 months' time, recommending $93 million for your program when you didn't give that information to the legislature. Rather, you yourself told the legislature that $70 million would be adequate to fund the program, and your own experts had told you otherwise.
We have another time for a question on that?
No, you have a rebuttal.
The point is that this committee that you appointed and that you, in your words, you said develop strategies. When you appointed this Education Study Committee, you said that they would be charged to develop strategies for identifying those teachers who need to upgrade their competencies, whether that be through in-service teacher training or some other means. The next year, in 1975, that committee recommended a program to you, which is essentially the Professional Improvement Program. But whether this program is a little different from that or not, you let the idea die back in 1975. And 5 years later, when you had left office as governor, you had not proposed any such program as that to the legislature.
All right, gentlemen, let's move now to our last category. And our final category is wide open. You may question each other on any issue you choose. It has been estimated that this election will cost some $25 million for both of you to get your message to the voters. Tonight, you have a totally free opportunity. And Governor Treen, your question first.
I don't know where you got the $25 million figure.
Jim Brown.
Oh, okay. This is my question?
Yes.
As you know, the state is faced with a lawsuit brought by state employees claiming that they were ripped off by the deferred compensation program set up during your administration. You said you got involved to help a friend, Jules LeBlanc, who was, incidentally, at that time, convicted of the crime of misapplication of bank funds. Is it not true that you were obligated on bank loans for which income from the deferred compensation program was pledged, and you were obligated on bank loans taken out by Ken Womack, or on which Womack was the principal debtor?
Boy, how you use politics. You really must want to get reelected bad. You know, because your own hand-picked U.S. attorney looked at the program for 18 months. Your own attorney general advised you that there was no basis for the lawsuit you're talking about, so you took state money and hired a private law firm in Baton Rouge just last week to file a lawsuit on the eve of the election to make those silly allegations for which there can be no proof in an effort to politicalize something that has been dead by a U.S. attorney who looked at it for 18 months and refused 3 times to let me testify. Now, in further response to your question, let me say to you, no funds from DCCL were pledged to retire the loans. You have it totally backwards. I never signed any loans to secure any DCCL monies. And I told you in New Orleans, and I'll tell you again, if I cannot prove that, I'll get out of the race, provided you agree now that you'll get out if I prove otherwise. Facts are, Governor, that the DCCL situation was not involved with the loan guarantees that I signed. And this lawsuit that you have now engineered at taxpayers' expense to further a bogus issue is nothing at all but a last-minute election eve effort on your part to make allegations for which there's no substance. The own U.S. attorney that you helped appoint and who was very partisan to you could not find any money missing. There is no money missing. The money was sent to the Capital Bank in trust and paid to the various product companies. And the bottom line on all this is that you allowed the program to remain in place without change, same companies, same administrator, same Ken Womack, same banks, same commissions for 2 years after you were governor, while you were looking at the program almost on a daily basis. If it was all that bad, then shame on you for not changing it. And if it wasn't that bad, then shame on you for trying to make it a bogus issue in an election.
Well, of course, you have not answered the question about whether or not you were obligated on bank loans taken out by Ken Womack or on which Womack was the principal debtor.
Not in connection with DCCL.
We're not talking about here today whether or not you committed a crime. That's for other people to determine.
Your own U.S.
What
attorney
we're trying...
Let's let each other speak at the proper time.
The grand jury was made up of people chosen in the normal way by a judge, appointed, a Democrat sitting judge. The grand jury cannot indict without the consent of a United States attorney, and you know that, so the United States attorney may have done you a real service there. We've not hired a firm at the last minute to go out after you, Governor Edwards. What we have done is to hire a law firm to defend the state of Louisiana against the claims being made by these people and to determine if these people that we believe now probably were ripped off, and indeed the evidence is that they were ripped off, have a claim against the state. And if they have a claim against the state, to go against the responsible parties. And as long as I'm governor, I'm going to pursue that. We are going to go after the responsible parties, whether it's Jules LeBlanc or Edwin Edwards.
Governor Edwards, your question.
I'm certainly not worried about you going after me. The length of time it takes you to make decisions, I'll be dead before you decide.
Your question.
But let me tell you something.
You want to ask it as a question?
Isn't it not a fact that you employed those attorneys within the last 30 days after the Attorney General's man told your people there was no case and that it would be a waste of the state's money to pursue it?
Absolutely not.
Would you like a rebuttal? Would you like a rebuttal?
How can you rebut absolutely not?
Would you like to comment on it? Would you like to comment?
Yes, I'll comment. I'll be perfectly willing to let the 3,500 plus or minus state employees that are in the DCCL program decide the election. You want to make that deal?
Yes.
If you think they were ripped off?
Yes, that'd be a great deal.
Well, fine.
Right.
All right, gentlemen. We are now, we have a little bit of extra time since you were so quick in your responses, or did not give any responses in some instances. And so, therefore, I am going to give each of you a little bit longer in your closing statements. You're going to have 2 minutes rather than 1 moment. And we will begin with, by the toss of a coin, we've selected, we've predetermined who begins and who closes. And Governor Edwards has the first closing statement.
First, my thanks to the JCs and to the JC women for this forum. I was the founding president of my hometown chapter of the JCs, and I know its purposes, and appreciate very much this opportunity to work with them and for them to continue their governmental enterprises. Second, I appreciate your watching. The fact that you've watched this long in this fourth debate indicates that you have more than a passing interest in this race and what is happening in Louisiana. And I therefore think it incumbent upon us to try to address the issues. I want to make several points. Number one, I have before me a letter dated December 22nd, 1980, signed by the Commission Administration appointed by Governor Treen, E.L. Bubba Henry, certifying that there was a surplus in the state as of June 30th of 1980 of $549,382,984. Those are his own commissioner's statements. It is true that a portion of that accrued during the 3.5 months that he was governor, but he had not had a legislative session, he had not signed a bill, he had not done anything at all relative to changing the state's fiscal posture, and cannot claim credit except by an accident of taking office on March 10th for what happened, good or bad, to the state's fiscal affairs. But even if you want to accept his version that he's entitled to 1/3 of it, there's still a healthy surplus, which is gone. There's also $300 million that once was in an enhanced mineral fund, which is also gone. There was also $280 million in the unemployment compensation fund, which is also gone. plus $360 million of borrowed money. And in addition to that, $1.2 billion of bonded money borrowed and spent. It is all gone. And 240,000 people are out of work. I suggest to you that we need to go back to the era of excellence which we had in the decade of the 70s. I ran the state, provided the reforms that were needed, wrote a new constitution, reorganized state government, which has not been tampered with since Governor Treen became governor, lowered taxes 3 times, funded education and programs for the handicapped, the aged, and the needy, did whatever we could to bring industry here so people could have jobs, and as a matter of fact, over the 8-year period, managed well, and left the state in good condition. I suggest to you we need to go back to those good times, and I would like the opportunity of doing that again with you and for you.
Thank you. Governor Treen?
A moment or two on the fiscal situation. In the 8 years that Edwin Edwards was governor of the state of Louisiana, spending increased 163%. In my 4 years, 33%. If that's the good times he's talking about, you better watch out. With regard to the surplus, we use the surplus just like this man used the surplus when he was governor. Except in the last year that he was governor, he took $125 million of that surplus and used it for recurring expenses, which is really a no-no. We use surplus for capital construction projects, for hospitals, roads, bridges, educational institutions. And that's where we've invested the surplus, and that's where I invested the considerable surplus that was there the following year, about a $556 million surplus. Now, the former governor lies when he says that there was an enhanced mineral trust fund when he left office. There was not. There was not one nickel in that fund. And it accumulated at a later time, and that money was used again for hospitals, roads, bridges, and university projects. He continues to pass that lie all around the state of Louisiana. Now, what is this campaign all about? What is this election about? I think this election is to determine whether the people of this state really want good government or not. Do they want government that is sensitive to their particular needs? To have a governor that will work hard at solving the problems, such as we've done in the economy and in the environment, and a government that tries to save taxpayers' money, or a government that tries to use taxpayers' money to help out friends of the administration? Do we want a government in which any citizen can come and have a chance to get a contract or a permit, or is that going to depend upon who you know in government? Getting at the truth in this campaign, as I have said many times, is going to be difficult. But the people of this state, in my judgment, can do so. And the truth is that I have devoted my energies in the interest of each and every person in this state, and I intend to continue doing that, solving the problems of our state. And one thing you can be certain of, Dave Treen will never do anything to make you ashamed of the governor of the state of Louisiana.
Thank you. Maybe applause for both of our candidates. For those who say political debates are boring, this evening certainly belied that. We are out of time, but I'd like to thank all of you for being with us this evening. Governor Treen, Governor Edwards, the Louisiana JCs, our audience here and at home. Our debates may be over, but the campaign still has a long way to go. We would urge you to follow it and participate as a voter on October 22nd. For Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Beth George Courtney. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Major funding for the production of Campaign 83, the Treen Edwards debates, is provided by Exxon Company USA's Baton Rouge refinery, a partner in growth with Louisiana since 1909.